Hello and welcome to the Business of Authority. I'm Jonathan Stark,
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
and today we're going to talk about this AI wave, people.
I think the funniest part in the green room was trying to figure out what to call this episode.
Yeah, right. So it was sort of like, is it the Wild Wild West? Is it a gold rush? Like, yeah, what is it? And it seems to me to both of us that it's more like a wave. It's like this thing you can see on the horizon, and it's like, are you going to paddle out and ride it, or just stay on the beach, nice and comfy? So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think of it like the gold rush where, I mean, in some ways I do because there's riches to be made, but it doesn't feel like something where people just sink their life savings and lose everything and die old, broken, alone, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like that.
No.
Right. So, we did an episode about ChatGPT just like 10 episodes ago or so. But it keeps coming up. I keep using it every day, and I keep having conversations about it with like sort of non-technical people who haven't probably don't have, they got like normal jobs, and they probably don't have a real reason to certainly as big a reason as perhaps someone like me would to investigate it. So the only thing they know about it are the sound bites from the media, like it's going to take jobs, and it's going to
Mm-hmm.
take over the world, or it's going to make our kids stupid because they're all going to cheat on their tests or cheat on their reports. Like all the bad things, it hallucinates. It comes back with authoritative lies, and it's not that I'm not saying that any of that stuff is true or not true, but it's very one-sided. And for people who deal in ideas for a living, which probably means a lot of speaking and writing, it's unprecedentedly powerful tool that I feel like people who listen to the show should be experimenting with, at least, because it's just incredible capability. It's amazing.
Well, it's because we can. And it's, as a I don't know if I'm a normo, I would say I'm a non-technical person, but I can experiment with this, right? I play with this daily for different things because I want to see what it can do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no barrier, right? I don't have to be a tech bro to figure this out. We're not talking about blockchain where you have to figure all these little pieces out. This is achingly simple for people to experiment with. And we are the front, I won't say we're the bleeding edge, but we certainly are the front edge of professions that want to try this out and see what it can do.
Yeah. And so we were talking before the show about Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. And when I say normos in this context, I mean people who don't have an online business. They don't write books. They're like, I don't know, a teacher or whatever, who probably is like really hates the idea because of all of the true things that students can do with it, let's say. But in Jeffrey Moore's book, which if you haven't read, it's great. Crossing the Chasm, he identifies 5 different types of markets that a technology would go through. And there's the early market stuff where you've got it's like a normal distribution curve, kind of like the camel's hump. And the beginning, you've got like a very small number of innovators who love trying new things. They're like neophiles. They just love new stuff. They want to play with all the new things. Developers fall into this category very often because they just love playing with new tools and stuff. So a lot of developers fall into this category. And then after the innovators, there's the sort of early adopters, where the feature set of the thing is starting of the tool, whatever it is starting to get to MVP status, where the innovators will put up with bugs, they'll put up with command line, they'll put up with no interface, and just to be like the cool kids, like the ones that are aware of this thing, the ones that like the people at the party who are talking about the thing. So then the early adopters, it's like it is basically usable in an extremely small domain, or like a small limited capability feature set. And then there's the chasm, which is the titular chasm, where the technology needs to jump this gap from the sort of minimum feature set of the early adopters into a whole product solution, like a bigger, covers more use cases, more comprehensive solution. And then you'll get early majority people, like tons of early majority, because you're getting into the mainstream side of the camel hump. And you'll get a whole bunch of people in the early majority that are like, wow, this is, they've got a lower risk tolerance than the early adopters or the innovators. They want it to work. These are the Apple people. They want it to just work. These are the people that bought the first iPhone, like waited in line to buy the first iPhone. And it's like,
guilty.
Yeah, me too. So early majority, boom. And then there's the late majority, which is a comparable size chunk of the pie where it's like, everybody's got an iPhone. I notice everybody in the Starbucks has an iPhone and I'm still rocking a Nokia candy bar. So, maybe I should really take a look at this. And then you get at the end, the tail end, you get this chunk of laggards who are explicitly not interested. Like, nope, I'm going to stay with my flip phone or whatever it is. And anyway, so for mobile, I was on this ride from the very beginning, pretty close to the very beginning. I would say I would count people who bought iPhone 1 almost as early adopters because that thing didn't do much. It was revolutionary, but it didn't even have cut and paste. You couldn't send pictures over email. I mean, it was pretty limited, but it was still amazing. And then, we got to the sort of whole product solution phase of the early majority, late majority. That was around 2010 or so. And like every enterprise was like, we need to have a mobile strategy. And then that was like my whole business for a bunch of years. And then the laggards was sort of at the end of the wave when I was like, where everybody who was going to adopt an iPhone strategy or an iPhone plan or mobile plan they're just like, nope, we purposely skipped this. And so I went through that whole phase with that. And this wave that we see on the horizon is getting close, and it is very much in the innovator and early adopters phase. And lots of really smart people are iterating like crazy on this stuff. Like apps that I'm using are announcing new features on a weekly basis, if not faster, and improvements to this, that, and the other. And this stuff is because they're getting early adopters to test it and give feedback, and then that makes the thing better. And like, what features would you anyway? It is like the thing that our goal for the episode is for you, the dear listener, to try it if you haven't. If you're against the whole idea of the thing, to me that feels like succumbing to the headlines, because it's like a super powerful tool for people like us. It's a form
of resistance. And I think when we do these kinds of businesses, it's dangerous to be resistant to new ideas. Doesn't mean you're going to embrace them ever, but just being flat out resistant usually is not a great long-term strategy for your business.
Right. Yeah. This is worth experimenting with. And so we could go into maybe, I don't think we talked about this last time, and certainly it's changed in the whatever 10 weeks that we've been talking, that we talked about it since we talked about it last. But I went to make a list of the other day for a possible email broadcast, make a list of the AI, air quotes, or machine learning types of things that I'm using. And here's the thing that was really eye-opening to me is, like, I thought of the obvious use cases, like, podcast show notes that we use to create show notes. Riverside now automatically has transcriptions. Descript we use for a couple of things. It's all machine learning type stuff, like automatically remove ums and ahs from the transcript and shorten the space between. You can have it re-say something in your voice. We haven't used that, but it can do it.
I love that idea.
It's wild, right? Give it a script and it just sounds like you saying it. Seth Godin did an episode of Akimbo where he typed in questions into ChatGPT. He got the answers in text, and then he fed all of that into, I forget the name of the product, but it's by 11 Labs. And they trained an AI on his voice. And I'm spoiling it because he doesn't reveal that at the beginning of the episode. You get to the end of the episode and he says, oh, by the way, I didn't say any of that you just listened to for 25 minutes. And it was completely convincing. I had no idea that it wasn't him reading it. It was shocking.
Well, so, yeah, that's the scary thing.
Right? Yeah, well, it depends, right? I mean, yes, there's I don't want to talk about let's leave it to the press to talk about all this scary stuff and deep fakes and all of that. But the power of that for someone who is trying to lead a revolution or spread a big idea or lead a mission, especially a soloist, it's jaw
The
dropping.
ultimate leverage.
Right. It is insane. Is it perfect right now? No, but it makes a great first draft.
Well, and I think, there's a group of folks in my world who are really nervous about this. And there's some content writers who are scared, right? They're like, oh, how is this going to work? And it's going to take away work from me. I'm going to have downward pressure on my fees, et cetera, et cetera. And I keep coming back to, we were talking about this before we hit record, is that this is about a first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And Jonathan, you have a good story about that. This is about having a first draft. And if you can use, even as a writer, if you can use AI to get a first draft, your client doesn't care where it came from. What they care about is that it works for their brand, for example, or their campaign, or whatever they're hiring you to do. Like Chat GPT or any AI is not going to be perfect. It is, at least not anytime soon. It's not going to come out with exactly the right voice that sounds like your client or sounds like you, but it can get you a really good first draft and save you a ton of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're on the high end of that food chain, your client doesn't care how you get it. What they care is that you get it. They care about the outcome. And so,
Right.
as long as you're not billing by the hour,
Exactly.
this could be something that saves you time and actually makes you more money.
Right. So check this out. This is going to sound weird, but it's like, give it a second, let it sink in. You could, in theory, let's say that it takes, half of your time to do first drafts, and you could increase your productivity by, like, say, double. And you could take on twice as many clients working the same amount of time as you currently work. And you say, but how could I attract twice as many clients? Well, you could cut your prices by 75% and come out ahead in terms of working less and making more, as long as you're not billing by the hour. So It's like, in theory, and if you set up some tooling to, like, make it a little bit more streamlined for your particular situation, theoretically, you could increase your productivity to a point where you could lower your price below what your manual competitors are charging and still be increasing your profits.
Yes. Well, and plus with content writing, what a lot of people do is that they leverage it with other people. And what I hear a lot of people say is, I have some contractors I use, but really all they can get me is a good first draft. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the funny thing is, this is possibly unique to me because I'm sort of really not interested in having employees or contractors of any kind. The stuff I'm using it for is not taking a job away from anyone. Not that it won't do that, but it's not taking a job away from anyone, because I just wouldn't have done this stuff before. So now I'm doing things that I wouldn't have done before because they're so cheap and quick and easy to do that I might as well, right? So it's kind of like I have an employee. It's kind of like I have a first drafter, like intern type of employee who understands my stuff and can do a good first pass, like a first pass that I'm like, that's probably something I would have written. It needs to be fixed, but I avoided that, like, struggle of organizing it.
And there's an intellectual cost to doing that, right? When you create that first draft, whatever it is, there is an intellectual price that you pay for doing that. It means that you weren't able to do something else. It means that maybe your brain cells got tired at that kind of work, and so you could only do so much of that in a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So here's a crazy story that I know wasn't in the last episode because it just happened to me. But there's I don't know how much I can talk about this because they should talk about it, because I had a meeting with the CTO of a company who wanted me to sign an NDA. I didn't sign it yet, but I know they don't want people, like, talking about their pricing and stuff like that. So I'm just going to keep it a little bit high level. But the idea is, and this was publicly announced, it was like, there's a podcasting platform that exists that is good, and they have announced that they are creating a thing that will turn your, not just an episode, but it'll look at your entire podcast, to, like, ingest all the audio for your entire podcast and turn it into the first draft for a 260 page book. And the phase that they're at is that they're looking for kind of like alpha and beta testers to play with it. So, but the price currently is so low that you'd be nuts not to try. If you had a podcast
Mhm.
with even 50 episodes and you write books, like you might as well try it. It's
Sure.
like, right. It's very interesting, but super early days, right? Like there's no interface. It needs to be manually done by someone, air quotes, manually done. Like the different algorithms have to be driven one after the other manually and tuned manually at first because they're still figuring it out. But we're in the innovation stage. Like this is the kind of thing innovators would be interested in, where they want to kind of be first to the party. They want to understand the capabilities, what it's good at, what it's not good at. Like not hearing from someone like us what it's good at or how it might be useful for you, the listener. It's like you play with it and find out. There's just like, but the other thing I was going to say before that I never got around to is that ultimately there's no avoiding this. If you use software, it's going to be in everything. So it's like it's already integrated directly into Illustrator, like the Stable Diffusion stuff. I don't know if it's specifically that model, but Adobe bought some startup, and they're integrating it directly into Illustrator. There's been AI in Gmail forever with the smart replies. It's going to be in all of the tools you already use. So in theory, you could wait, but it's going to be there. It's built into Squarespace. It's built into, I think, HubSpot and WordPress. I don't know if it's in WordPress yet. There's probably a GPT plugin, but this stuff it's going to be everywhere. It's built into Copilot's built into, I think, VS Code or whatever the IDE is. So I feel like, I recognize I'm a tech guy and a solo dyed-in-the-wool soloist. So perhaps for me, like my excitement level is much higher than that would be for other people. But I don't know how you don't experiment with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just keep coming back to this is excellent for first drafts of pretty much anything. I mean, I've started using it for the tweets that I do from my weekly blog post. Now, it's only a first draft. It's way too salesy for me, the first what they give me, but it gives me something. And it's so much easier to just go, oh, well, take out the salesy part and focus on the meat. And it also will come up with hashtags that I haven't thought of. And that I certainly wasn't going to spend the time trying to go find. So yeah, it just feels so natural now to just use it. So I use it every day. And as a non-tech person, but I guess I'm not a normo in your definition, I want to figure out how to use this because it will help in my practice. And I don't mean in the business. It will absolutely and is helping in the business, but in my practice, in terms of how I deal with clients, if I can get them to something that is going to cut the amount of time they spend on someone and increase their profits, hello, I want that at the top of my list for my clients.
Right. Yeah, because there's a speed factor here too, where it would get them what they want faster. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's ignore this at our peril. And what feels different to me about some of the other waves that we've had is that you don't have to be a tech genius to participate on the front end. I mean, I am living proof of that. Now, am I creating products with that? No, I mean, I'm not really interested in that. But lots of people are, and they're creating them for people like us who are ready to experiment and want to give some of these things a try.
Yeah. Yeah. Another quick story. So Louis Grenier, who runs the Everyone Hates Marketers podcast, he just launched a thing where this is like innovators and early adopters, right? He created it's like a Google spreadsheet that you buy, and you get a copy of his Google spreadsheet. I might be describing it a little bit inaccurately, but that's basically how it looks in the videos. And I bought it, but I haven't opened it up yet. But you have this spreadsheet, and you paste in something like Rochelle, you could go to Amazon and paste in the book reviews for your book, or one of us could go to a really popular book like Atomic Habits or something, and you can copy out the book reviews, and like paste them into this spreadsheet, and it has like a macro that goes through and pulls out and summarizes the top 10 sentiments that are reflected in those. So like you don't have to read them all. You don't have to read. It's probably got 40,000 comments. So you could just go through, paste that in, and then it's going to be like, oh, like here are the three most valuable things that people who read the book have commented on. Like, these are the three most valuable things that they got out of the book. These are the three main deficiencies of the book. These are the three biggest complaints. And with that information, you could decide to write a whole new book, or like or he could, or someone else could write a sort of part 2 for Atomic Habits or whatever. And the amount of time, like, you just wouldn't do that otherwise. It's a thing.
You could also do that with a competitor's book and say, okay, here are the things that are missing. So here's what the marketplace is looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, right. If you know that the readers of that book are basically your same audience, then you can get a whole bunch of intelligence very quickly for like $49, right? It's insane.
Yeah.
There's another one that crossed my radar that is, again, it's like all of these things start out a little bit buggy because people are moving so quickly. So you have to have a little bit of patience with them. And that was certainly true from my experience with this one, but it's called Chat CSV, which I think is the most hilarious name ever. And the idea is, it's like an ask me anything for your spreadsheets. So, you upload a spreadsheet. So I took a couple of months worth of purchase data from Moonclerk, right? And it's got, a bunch of columns, but it's mostly all stuff you'd expect. It's like how much the revenue for the purchase was, like what was the price that was paid, what was the thing that was bought. And I just upload the spreadsheet, and I've got this, it's like, okay, upload your spreadsheet, you do. And then you get this chat interface, and I could say, create a pie chart of the top 10 products by form name, which is the name by product name, basically. And it just makes one. It's like, here you go.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it's like, and then you can just ask it stuff. You're like, oh, group it by this and tell me what's the profitability percentage across all the different products if, costs are the same or whatever.
Oh God.
And you're just,
I'm sorry, I can't get over this. This is the first I've heard of this. I just think of every consultant who sat there in the wee hours with data trying to make
making
sure
pivot tables.
Yeah, that you've got it right and you've rechecked it, and yes, it works. And even analysts inside big organizations. I'm thinking of some of the accounting analysts I used when I ran a Fortune 500 business, and they had to follow all these protocols from corporate, but those were the ones sitting there in the wee hours trying to figure it out before they had an earnings call. Yeah, man.
And yeah, you want to check it, but
of course.
I mean, I could just see like, yeah, this is right. Because it was only a month or two worth of data, and I already knew the numbers. So, and here's a really cool thing about this one. A lot of people talk about, it's been dubbed hallucinations, like AIs can hallucinate, like could we personify it anymore? But anyway, the idea that it, with a very authoritative tone, it will come back with complete BS, and you certainly wouldn't want that in something like an analyst working with spreadsheets. You definitely can't have that. So here's what it does with this particular one. You upload the thing, you ask it a question, and it lays out what it's air quotes thinking. So it's like, okay, it kind of like, for a developer will understand this. It basically writes the comments first of what it's going to do. And then it actually shows you the code that it's going to execute. And then it executes the code and gives you the result. So it gives you all the information you need to check the work right in front of you. And you're like, yeah, that is how I would do it. But it takes like 5 seconds, and it would take you like 30 minutes.
Well, it'd take me like 30 days if I had to write code. But yeah. I mean, it really is mind-boggling what can be done. And even if you're not the one sitting there creating these new products, you can certainly use them in how you work and how you streamline. Even if it's just your back office, you can streamline that.
Exactly.
I just think the potential for this is amazing. And why not experiment now? I mean, I feel like we're starting to sound like a broken record, but first drafts, experimenting, like anytime you think about something, it's like, ooh, is there a way I could use AI to make this faster, easier, more reliable?
Right. Yeah. So here's an approach. Here's an exercise, dear listener. So here's something I did, and if perhaps you could do the same. So I have like every other week I do kind of like an office hours call called Ditcherville Live with my coaching community. And I have there's like this call. It's usually an hour, hour and a half, and I've got a checklist or an SOP that I use to run it every other week, because it's like every other week. So that's enough time for me to kind of forget what I did last time. So finally one day I wrote it down, and we've talked about SOPs before and how useful they are, because you can just execute and not be being creative every single time you're like setting up the call. And the place where I did it was Crowdcast, and they released a huge new update that I was not that I don't like and didn't serve my use case. So I was like, well, if I have to switch to this new V2 of Crowdcast, I'm going to look around and perhaps switch to something else completely. And like, what else am I already paying for? I'm already paying for Zoom. So let me look at all these different things. So basically, I was already in the mode where I was like, I'm going to update this SOP because I'm probably going to switch off Crowdcast. And so I'm looking at it, and now I'm like, there's like 170 steps on it or something like that. So I'm like, it's a lot. There's some parts that are definitely really annoying. And so with some experimentation under my belt, without the experimentation, I wouldn't have been able to do this. But with the experimentation under my belt, I went through the process, and at every point I was like, how can I optimize this with either ChatGPT or Midjourney or one of the image creation things, or Descript, or podcast show notes, or whatever. What can I do? And I collapsed. I removed like 70 steps. And not only that, but the 70 steps that I removed, some of them were the most annoying things. And it's so much better. It's so much better. And it's better than First Draft, because if you can as you get better at ChatGPT specifically, you can you can seed the prompt with examples of how you want the output to look.
Yep.
So I don't know if this is common knowledge, but it's you can really get it to give you for example, it's like, here's a list of 10 questions, summarize each in fewer than 10 words, include change all of the quotes, any apostrophes or straight quotes or apostrophes, change them to curly quotes, separate them with a horizontal rule like an HR tag. And I just would keep loading steps from my SOP into the prompt and then run it. And it's like, done.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great.
Yeah. Well, you're a more sophisticated user than the average bear, but all of those things are still possible. That's part of why we're encouraging you to try this first draft of things. Because, for example, when I said it gave me tweets that were too salesy, I can tell it, give me something that's not promotional, right? Give me this. Give me it in, as you said, X number of words or so many sentences. I want 5 paragraphs on this. I want 2 sentences on that. And, and you can just keep asking it, keep iterating till you get what you want. And it's still faster. Yeah.
And once you've figured out how to ask it the way to produce results, it's very reliable if you just ask it that way the first time. You can put in like 3 ton of instructions in the prompt. It's not just like, don't ask. It's not, when I first started using it, I was using it like Google, like, how do I do this or whatever, or what is the definition of blah? That's not where it shines. In fact, that's where it doesn't shine. That's where it'll give you like wrong answers. So it's much cooler if you give it like your example. I had a similar experience where I was like, summarize these 10 questions, and the summaries were almost longer than the questions. And I was like, oh, do it again, but in like a maximum of 10 words or so. I said, ideally keep it to 10 words, but you don't have to. And it doesn't. And or like the salesy thing. There's another one where just to test, I was like, compose a draft email message to a client that I want to fire. And in the tone of like Jeff Bezos or something like that. And then it sort of does it. And then I'm like, okay, do it again, but like with a more humane word choice. and totally does it. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's
I think you dropped those in our Slack space. I remember seeing those.
Right.
Yeah, they were fun.
And stuff like that is the kind of stuff where you're like, it's not right, or like, it's not one of these things like how to replace a toilet, and then it gives you a completely erroneous reply. It's giving you asked it a question where you personally can judge the correctness of the reply. So it sidesteps a lot of the problems that you'll see in headlines, like, it just gives you bad information back or whatever. Because you're like, no, this is good, because you're the arbiter.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not you're not Googling. At first, I used to say, like, it feels like you're Googling for stuff and it creates the article on the fly, but it's way more. That is a very naive first impression.
Yeah, I tried that early on. I was doing something for a client, and I was trying to find a watering hole for something. And I'd been, all over Google, and I had some, but I didn't have the ones I wanted. I thought, I'm just going to try ChatGPT. Maybe there's something I haven't thought of. And it didn't really give me anything I hadn't already found, because it was a Google style question. And so I manipulated the question like a bunch of different ways and didn't get anything better. So it doesn't work for everything, but a lot of times it's worth a try, because if it finds something for you, it's going to cut a lot of time. Had it worked as a Google search, it could have saved me 3 or 4 hours at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's this is one of those things the experimentation will lead you to, because like it doesn't have access to the live internet, so it can't really do anything super current. But anything that would benefit from it's kind of cool though, because it keeps you in evergreen territory, like the kind of stuff that is sort of tried and true kind of things. Anyway, I do feel like we're just beating a drum at this point, but
yeah, we are.
There are
first draft.
Yes, first draft. So like, consider it for first drafts of everything from a tough, this is going to sound weird, but like if you have a sort of emotionally sensitive thing to do, like it's a great place for first drafts for that stuff. It's really good for stuff that you can confirm is correct. Like, it's right because it did what you asked it to, because this is good. And just plan on not, I have done a couple of things where I've sort of, without a really strong quality assurance pass, I created, like, for example, there's this thing called Munch. I think it's getmunch.com, where you give it a video, like a long video, and it'll break it into a bunch of short videos for, like, Google, whatever they're called, Google Shorts, or like Instagram Reels or whatever, or TikTok. And at first pass, it looked really good. I was like, oh my God, it like, but I didn't go, but it made like 40 of them and I didn't watch them all. And so I uploaded them, and, and there's some that are just not good. Like, I should have gone through and been like, you still need to, at this point, you still need to go through and like check the work, but
this
that's
is not a
way
set it
easier.
and forget it thing.
Right. But it's way easier than doing it manually. And it's way cheaper than paying someone $2,000 a month or whatever to take every podcast episode or every video that you do and do this. So anyway, it's worth, I could talk about it all day, obviously, but it's definitely worth experimenting with and finding where you can create leverage. It's simple as that. Like, it again, and I almost guarantee you that you will find a way to do it that is jaw dropping.
And I think just to kind of round this out too, I want to go back to the people who are thinking, oh, this is going to change my world forever. And when I say my world, I mean your business, right? Especially if you're doing a lot of writing. Use this as an opportunity to go upstream, right? If you already have the kinds of clients that are paying you well above sort of standard writing rates, then you're going to be fine, because you're niching into an audience. You are creating something that's high value, that's transformational for their audience. You're fine. If you're not there yet, I would say, yeah, I would be concerned about it. So use it to move up the food chain. Use it to make your offerings better, more transformational, and more expensive.
Yeah. It's please give it a try. Don't believe the negative hype. I mean, not that it's not true, but
yeah, there's some truth in there.
Yeah, you
don't let that color everything.
Right. All right. Well, I'll shut up. I'm sure the point has been made at this point.
I'll shut up too.
Else? Okay. Cool.
I think we did it.
All right, folks. So that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark.
And I'm Rochelle Moulton.
And we hope you join us again next time for The Business of Authority. Bye.
Bye-bye.